And going forward, I will be the host of Behind the Code, the program that you're about to see here, and that's why I'm here to introduce it today. Behind the Code is a program that we are doing, we, the Technical Community Network, are doing to try to capture some of the corporate mythology, some of the people who were here for some of the exciting events in Microsoft's early history or even recent history. Some of the technical contributors, maybe there are names that everyone's heard or perhaps even faces they've seen, but they aren't necessarily familiar with the person or some of the background stories for how some of these technologies came to be. And the first episode that we recorded was with Mark Zbikowski, who perhaps is not a household name, but if anyone's ever opened up any executable file, DOS or Windows or a DLL, they've perhaps noticed that their first two characters are MZ, which happens to be Mark Zbikowski's initials. And these are one of the perks you have when you work on DOS 1.0 is you can put little Easter eggs like that in there. And so anyway, we have this program with Mark Zibbo, as he is known, and I've had the privilege of working for him for several years, and he's been around for 25 years, so at some point I think everyone at Microsoft will have worked for him. And I unfortunately didn't have the privilege of being one of the people working for him that finally drove him out of the company. I would have taken pride in that, but didn't actually happen. The program runs about 45 minutes, and Mark will be here. He'll be slightly late, but he will be here for live Q&A. And given that we have a fairly intimate audience, hopefully there should be a chance for everyone to get their questions answered. We have recorded 2 other episodes so far with Jim Gray and Anders Heilsberg, and all of the episodes are available publicly actually on MSDN. So if you go to channel9.msdn.com, and let me make sure that I in fact let me make sure that I'm telling you that right. Yeah, there we have it. Channel9.msdn.com has a link to shows, and then you can go to Behind the Code, where you can see, well, you'll trust me, if we were on a faster network, you by now would be seeing a link to the Jim Gray show is at the top. So I guess we're ready to start. Enjoy the show.
So we're here with a group of our Microsoft colleagues who help write and create the software that we love. In a moment, we're going to let them
doing a continuing series of these, so we will have live Q&A with Jim Gray and with Anders Heilsberg going forward. And with that, here's Mark.
Hey. So that's a little out of date. I just passed 25 years, so I feel pretty good about that. So I'm glad everyone didn't have to sit through that painful question and answer thing. It was all about management and how to deal with management, how to deal with the WinFS. But we won't go there. So, any questions people have about anything?
Besides WinFS.
But you can ask about WinFS too, but yeah. Hey, Sam.
I remember at the NT ship party, Dan Cutler said, these are the good old days. Now we got security and all this other stuff going on. Do you think we're still in the good old days, or is that over, or what do you see?
Well, those were the good old days, but we're making... Vista has been Longhorn and Vista have been a big struggle for the Windows organization. Windows for years has thrived, going back to Windows 93. And how many people remember Windows 93? It was actually called Windows 93 before they shipped it in 95. They like big bangs. They like, smoke and mirrors and big productions, and it takes a tremendous human cost. If you make a mistake by investing in the wrong set of technologies and leveraging those technologies too widely, and they start to fail on you, well, your big bang suddenly goes off as a whimper and several years late. I think we've learned a lot from Vista in terms of processes and procedures and how to scale something up to where you've got 1,500, 2,000 developers, which is just a frightful number. Vista has been, I think, will be a watershed. It's taken us a while to get out of it. We will get better. I think that everyone sort of from Steve and Bill on down realizes that we can't do business the way we used to in terms of the big bangs. So right now these are sort of our nightmares in the middle of the good old days, and Yeah. Yes.
Partially answered my question a little bit there, but I saw in your presentation there was a lot of correlation. I saw a lot of parallels between when you were talking about like OFS and Cairo and WinFS and or like Avalon and the Longhorn reset and so forth. It looks like we kind of made that same, whether it's a mistake or decision or track is the right word. Again, when investigating, how do we keep ourselves from doing that again? What can we do to kind of learn from that mistake and not do it repeat?
Make sure everyone watches Behind the Code.
Yeah, that's a good point. In many ways, the same mistakes that were made in, well, Cairo and OFS were in the same ballpark as the Avalon, CLR, and WinFS. Not nearly the same, because I think in the case of Cairo, we thought too much that it was an entire product when we should have looked at it as a technology source. Waited till the technology is matured, then shipped them. There are a bunch of us who wore our Cairo t-shirts when Windows 2000 shipped because, well, that's when finally all the Cairo technology made it out. I think that we made the mistake in the case of Avalon, CLR, and WinFS by betting all of Longhorn on them when they weren't even a quarter thought or a tenth thought through. That's something we have to face. We cannot take sort of promising technology and hold up new products just for that. Finish the technology. Make sure it works. Make sure that if you have to pare it back, that's one thing that was in the Q&A, one thing that if you're going to pare it back, make sure you pare it back to something that looks like an intellectual whole rather than something that you've sort of slashed and burned at. Okay, which is, that's a little harsh. I think Vista is far more polished than that, but it's because we've spent time polishing it. But a year and a half ago, it looked slash and burn. So I think that we need to, I think that as a company we need to, finish technologies more before we start betting products on them. Also, I think that people need to ask questions more. That when someone says, "Oh, you need to do this," it's like, "Well, why? We're not ready yet." Don't let people say, "Oh, we need to ship this by this date," and tell you that you're going to be ready when in fact you can't do it. You need to be honest and sort of in your face much earlier in things. Ask questions. Don't take things as thou shalt do something from people. Just ask questions. You may not like the answer, but at least get the data. Have people think about it. Yes?
Is Microsoft a technology company or a product company, and what's the difference?
Tough question. Everyone hear that? Yep, okay. I've described Microsoft to people that I've interviewed as being as close to research as you can come and still ship a product. I still think that's true. The scale of our products are getting larger, even though there's still many small things to be done in the context, but still in the context of much bigger releases. We've always been a product company, but we've always pushed technology a little too soon in many cases. This is not a pejorative comment. We just have. If you look at for the longest time when computers were coming out with 1 megabyte of memory, we were pushing operating systems that required 1.5 megs and trying to get people to sort of scale up. We've always been very eager to push the next piece of technology in a product, not necessarily thinking through the full implications. As talking about these, here where people do that. It's interesting because there have been many things that Microsoft has been sort of second to market with, but we've always had the better improvements, the better refinements, the better integration. There have been a number of things we've been first to market with. So as much as people say we're copycats, well, in some cases we are, in some cases we're not. From a technology standpoint, we have a pile of bright people, and we know how to put things together and make them into products. We may not be as nimble or agile as other companies are in terms of pulling out brand new things and getting to market quickly because we're a little bit bigger and we tend to tie things to product launches and thorough testing and internationalization and all this other stuff, which slows down the flow of technology. We're still doing it, but we just can't release it as quickly as we would like, as other people like. So I think we're still a company that we're as close to research as you can come and still ship products. Yeah.
So with all the sort of black eyes we've done,
My makeup works really well.
What?
My makeup works really well.
WinFS, CLR, maybe even back to OFS. Do you think we run the risk of becoming too risk averse, too averse to betting on some future technology because of all our bad experiences?
No, we've never had that. We've never had that problem. All of the senior management is very, very aggressive. They are not really. They're risk averse at some level because they are just. They're not risk averse. They are sort of. They are in many ways truly afraid of all the competition that is out there. I won't say paranoid because that's pushing things too far, but they really do worry about what the next thing is. They're worried about people who may take platforms away from us. They worry about people who may, people remember about Java. How was going to be a platform that would take away our advantage in the Windows API. It's all this stuff. I don't think that we're ever going to be risk averse. We're never going to be complacent. I know that. But as far as risk averse is concerned, I don't think that we will be. Some people have become more risk averse. I'll admit that I've become more risk averse, preferring to actually finish code before I check it in. But that's I don't think that will be a problem for us. Yes.
What do you think it's going to take for us to become more agile as a company in putting out new products?
We need to learn to decouple ourselves from each other. The one thing that Bill has always talked about is integration of our product. If you integrate too tightly, you become one product and you can't ever ship. That was one of the problems with Cairo. You need to do a much better job about being really, really good engineers and really separating your pieces, isolating where your dependencies are, managing your dependencies from a product delivery standpoint and from a coordination standpoint. Try to get out of the Big Bang mentality. Office got out of the Big Bang mentality years ago, and they every 18 months, 2 years, they come up with a new release, and it has significant stuff in it. Every release is better, but they're able to do that. Web delivery of services, through MSN or other similar things. That gives you a much shorter turnaround time. But those products are much smaller in scope in many ways than like a Windows, okay, or a Dev Studio. Those are much bigger products. We can find a way to, and actually the big problem is not so much that we like big bangs. Big bangs are our reaction to how we can effectively service products in between releases. Because if you keep dribbling out little pieces, the test matrix grows exponentially. Servicing from PSS's job becomes unbearable. It's only impossible now. It becomes unbearable later. We have to find a way to address that. Agility means understanding what the 5-year plan is, but doing the 1-year delivery. Cutting back, saying, here's this small piece that makes sense by itself as a standalone. It's the step in the right direction. Let's take that step. Because I bet if you take 2 or 3 of those steps, you'll find out that where you were ending up in 5 years, that's really the wrong direction to go in. Yes?
Sorry, I'm pretty new, but do you think the current source management scheme allows for agility?
You clearly didn't know about SLM. No. Yes, it does. The source, if done correctly, feature branches and being able to have rather stable WinMains that you can build against and private branches really do allow you to run off on your own. The group that is working on the transacted file system for Vista has been working since 2000 on a completely separate branch, part of the same source code tree, building off, using whatever the current release is as their basis, and then making their changes in isolation. It really does work. Clearly when you do get into merge hell if you modify something a common piece and you diverge for too long, but I think it does scale fairly well. Given there's a couple statements one can make. Does the whole VBL and feature branch idea work really well, or given our current breakdown into the large depots scale well? We're going to have to break down the depots. The depots are getting too large individually right now. It's just like having one disk that you're filling up. Eventually it gets full and you have to move to something else. Fortunately, the depots themselves are at a different level in the namespace than actually feature branches. So, help?
Yeah.
Okay.
In your personal opinion, you more like to work in today's Microsoft or the old Microsoft?
Yes. I like them both. They're very different. They're very different. The old Microsoft, we worked hard together, we played hard together. We did our 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and drank an awful lot of beer after 7 in the morning. And then today's world, we have one of the great things about working at Microsoft that I tell people is you work on really interesting projects. The stuff is interesting all the time. The projects may get boring after a while. The people are great. People are fabulous here. But you get to see millions of people use what you build. Okay? The old Microsoft, you really didn't get to see that. You maybe had millions, but you didn't have hundreds of millions. Now you get to have hundreds of millions of people do it. So you realize that the problems you're solving, the services you're giving to people, okay, the leverage you have in today's world is much greater than it was before. And that gives me a different set of rewards. The work-life balance is a little bit different, and yes, some days it's a little harder to see where you make progress, that you feel good about the progress of your piece or of the group you're working in because of sort of the scale of which you have to integrate with everybody else. But each one, I can't say which one I like better. Yeah. Yes?
What's the bouncing ball that we
The bouncing ball is what do we do at Microsoft? Okay, we ship products that solve people's problems. Okay, and yes, day to day, getting a long list of stress failures that you have to look at, or a bunch of documents and a bunch of architecture review meetings you've got to go to and listen to people drone on for a while. It's all part of getting to the end. The bouncing ball is what is the long-term purpose? Shipping the product, solving the customer's problems. If it's going to be if you're going to get distracted by the latest reorg or what's going on in someone else broke the bill, that kind of stuff, that's irrelevant. Move on. Take the longer view.
So the question about the transparency of the platform. So how do you see the balance between how many details the platform should expose to the developer who needs to understand how my code interacts with the platform? And on the other hand, if the platform exposes too much details, it makes easier to clone, for example, because I heard some messages that COM infrastructure is so good because it's nearly impossible to clone. So how do you see that balance?
Actually, I see that the more features we expose, the harder it is to clone, because there's just so much work for people to do to remain compatible with that. It's always a tough trade-off to as an architect and an API designer to try to figure out how much power do you give to the application and still retain the right to go and change your implementation at will. We have not done a very good job of that. We quite often change implementations and break things. This is a perennial problem with us. We also do a fair amount of under-specification of our APIs in terms of what their behavior is. So people rely on behavior that's not documented and not tested, so we can silently break people and not know it, which is also good for cloning, or helping people not clone. It's a tough trade-off. I've never really thought about it in the cloning sense. I've always thought about it in a let's protect myself for the future evolution sense. Yeah. Of course, the hardest thing for an API designer is not to say, oh, look, I've got this great toolkit that I want to expose. But let's take a look at what the applications want to do with this toolkit. And does my toolkit really meet up with their needs? I mean, yes, I can drive a Phillips screw with my regular flat screwdriver, but it's not a pleasant experience. And that's one of the things that it's taken me a while to have that fully beat into my head, that listen to the application writers, try to understand what they're trying to do, even though you're coming up with something brand new, for example, like WinFS, but think about what WinFS is doing. Think about how people are going to actually use it. Try to encourage somebody like the Shell or other groups to take full advantage of WinFS and tell you where your API set is wrong and listen to them. So.
Does that make you kind of like test-driven development, or what do you think of some of the agile methods?
Some of the agile methods work really well in small groups. They don't really scale to big groups. Having a small number of real zealots doing all the coding and having some small number of testers that run around and fix bugs around you doesn't scale very well. It may work for small things. Getting to 700,000 lines of a file system, I think, really pushes that.
So you're saying that you don't think they work because they don't scale?
Depends on how you want it. Depends on the scope of the project you want to do. If you want to do something like the Windows shell, it's probably the wrong thing to do. If you want to do something smaller, absolutely, it's the right thing. You have to pick the great thing about Microsoft is that the great thing about the Microsoft process is that there is no process. Every group invents their development process. Every group invents their documentation style. They do it, which is in a sense is fundamentally very, very agile. It allows us to do what we think is right for the particular project. The larger projects, unfortunately, have to coordinate more. This is like the Windows. I mean, even in Windows, there's 8 million coding styles. There's roughly one coding style in the kernel, well, except for the people who write in C++, but we won't go there. But it's that degree of agility is here already.
So you mentioned the Big Bang attitude that a lot of people have, and which is the reason why sometimes we end up like overcommitting and probably missing deadlines. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you on that. So what do you think is the alternative? Do you think we should go more towards an out-of-band release kind of cycle where people work on their projects and they work on it in isolation, finish it, and ship it rather than trying to coordinate and everything come up in a Windows release and everybody comes together and ends up missing deadlines and pushing things further back? Do you think it's better if different teams work on the little projects, finish it and ship it like Max does it, iSCSI did, like MPIO did, R2?
Okay, among the ways of structuring our releases, there are three that I have thought a lot about. There's the Big Bang, which has certainly its human cost issues. There is the train yard approach. The train leaves the station every 18 months, and you're either you're either with your bags waiting at the depot, or you're not. And if you're waiting, then you get on the train, you can go, and otherwise just wait for the next one. Or there's the complete out-of-band approach, okay, which is everyone has their own jetpack and can take off when they want. The problem with that approach is servicing, testing and servicing. The test matrix goes up exponentially. PSS is going to have to say, okay, which version of iSCSI do you have? Because we've released 5 in the last year. You think about what's happened with all the releases of service packs, also with the many versions of, for example, the .NET framework. It is a mess to try to figure out what's wrong in your system. Okay, DLL hell is sort of an extreme case of that. If we can solve the servicing issue, make our components isolatable enough and our diagnostic tools good enough that we can actually narrow in on what's going on, as opposed to having, some poor end user and some poor PSS person who really neither of them understands the code at all try to diagnose a problem. You can see how bad that is. I think the train yard approach is much better. I think that if you can ship products completely in isolation, you can do that out of band. For example, the stuff that comes out of MSN, they can turn out a new release of something in a month or two and not a problem, because they don't have nearly the combinatorial issues that we do. Make sense? Okay.
I'm curious how you personally balance management versus individual contributions. It seems like you're.
I'm back to being an individual contributor.
Do you prefer that?
No, it depends. I've done it 4 times in my career. I've built teams, run them for a number of years, and then said, I'm done managing for a while. Let me go back to doing stuff that I really like. As a manager, in the OS2 days, I had a team that was about 30 people. And I found that to me is way too many people for my preference. I would spend more of my time doing management stuff than the technical stuff, which is what I'm good at. I think that managing small teams is a great way to get leverage, is I can sit there and think about the 10 things I want to do today that I know I can only get 2 done if they were me, and I can make sure that it gets done. I don't know, over the last year when I was running the file system team, I knew everyone's schedule. I watched check-ins. I wrote code myself. I fixed bugs. I tried to schedule, have my life be as regimented as possible in a certain fashion to allow me the freedom to do that. My management stuff to be as regimented as possible to allow me the freedom to go and do the coding. For me, I need a code. That is part of what I do. I like the architecture side, but my experience from OS2 was that architects in one room and coders over here, which is what IBM had, is not a happy mixture, because architects will produce things that the coders can't do, and they don't listen to what the opinions of the coders because they're just not architects. So my view is the architect has to understand everything. I understand that at some point there are some people who want to do management, pure management, and that's fine. They need to understand who their technical leads are and rely on them. If you're a technical person and you're going up the ladder and you want to do management, at some point you have to say, I am no longer technical, and just really trust your technical people to do that. Otherwise, you become a micromanager, and that's not a good thing. Yeah.
It's a two-part question. How many languages have you gone through in your career? And as you go through it, is it getting easier to program with the new languages?
Okay. In my career at Microsoft, I started in PLM. Who remembers PLM? Went to assembly language, and went to C, and then C++, and that's basically all the languages I've ever checked code in. I've written code in C# and I've written Java. I gave up Lisp when I left graduate school. The problems are different. Each language has a specific place where it's very, very useful, and it's one of these. It's a tool in a toolkit. Find the one that's appropriate for the right thing. I think that if you're writing in user mode code, I think that C# and using the Dev Studio is a great thing. You can use Eclipse if you want, but Dev Studio is pretty good too. It is getting easier. The abstractions in the languages are popping up. It is, unfortunately, with these abstractions, it is also easier and easier to write truly obscure code. When we were writing stuff for Cairo in C++, we had a long list of features of the language which are illegal to use, because some of the features in the language are intended for what I call programming in the small. It's clever things that allow you to do your job really, really quickly. But programming in the large, in terms of working in a big team where someone else who didn't write the code has to come in later and maintain it, okay, it just gets in the way. Things like, example, operator overloading in C++. I've seen people use the plus operator for strings for concatenation. I've seen them use the OR operator for concatenation. It's like, pick one. Okay, yes, it's, the vertical operator. Yes, it's PL1, but it died a horrible death too. So it is getting easier, but you as I don't know if I mentioned that in the talk, but just because you are using a high-level language, that never removes your responsibility to understand what code is being generated. Because you can do some things that seem very simple in the language, but generate just the most unattractive code possible. And yes, we have gigahertz processors with lots of memory, but certainly on the operating system side, our job is to do cool things, but leave as many MIPS left over on the machine for the user. And even if you're doing apps, you got to do the same thing. Okay, that's part one.
That was part two. I think that's easier.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Part one was the number.
Okay. Okay. Come on. Yes.
What are your thoughts on product planning process and how much it should be driven by the technical folks versus product planning, product management, and the market and the business and the customers?
I think it's got to be driven by everybody. There's no end to technical innovation in the company and outside the company. Everyone here, no matter what your level is in this company, ought to be listening, reading things out reading either the academic journals or doing sometimes searching the web to find out what's new that interests them. There's all kinds of things that we should be looking at from a technical standpoint, where we should be trying to look at the technology and try to figure out where we can apply it. I think that there's sort of two things there. There's actually the technical side, in terms of ideas, and then the other side is how much is really truly customer driven, planning. Yes, those are two things that need to be traded off. I think that without customers we can't sell our technology, and without some degree of technology our customers will stagnate. So it's a very tough trade-off. I can't give you any good guidelines there.
Yeah. So now that WinFS is kind of shipping out of band with Windows, and they don't have huge customers in Windows like the shell and things like that developing on top of them, how do you think that's going to affect their ability to develop a solution that really works well, like you said, for application developers and for Windows?
Well, there still is a shell group that has done some work on top of it. So they have been validating their API model, their schema, at some level. So there is some validation there. It's going to make it'll be a V1 product. Okay, there will be big changes before V2. They will stub their toes many times. We all do. V1 products always stub toes, and they will just learn from that. I think that the developer community knows that this is going to be effectively an SDK kind of release that can be deployed, but still has rough edges. That there will need to be service packs, and things won't be as fluid, as easy as they would like. As good a team as it is, and it really is a good team, there's a number of things that they've had to just skimp on because they just don't have the time. So I'm looking forward to it, but yeah. Yep. Two guys in the same line of fire. Yeah.
So, every time I pass by your office, I see this zebra staring back at you.
Yeah.
Is there a history behind that?
Yeah, I went on vacation one summer and came back, and there was a zebra in my big inflatable zebra. It's about 6 feet tall, and apparently that was what after. That was right after the Win2K3 ship party, and apparently they had stuffed animals at the party where apparently some people borrowed the stuffed animals, and there was some email being sent around like, why does Mark Z have a zebra in his office, and shouldn't he return that? It's like, well, Mark's not even in the country. But I got this big stuffed zebra. I've managed to divine who left it there. I have kept the zebra because it's a great conversation piece. It's my roommate, and I've kept it inflated. And don't ask where the inflation valve is. And that's the whole story. Yes.
So there's interview kind of it mentions two projects, and it sounds like a little bit of the same story. So first of all, OS2 versus protected mode Windows, and then OFS versus NKFS. So it sounds like there are two teams on Microsoft doing different things, and then decide, okay, we choose one over the other. So is it a healthy strategy? So it sounds like with Longhorn, it didn't quite happen when they did reset. There was not another new compelling thing to put in place. So is it good to have two parallel things like that?
Well, the duplication in OS2 versus protect mode Windows, that was there was a number of product planning issues, as I mentioned in there, where we really didn't think hard enough about the customer's assets, which were the software that they already had. We thought that the ISVs would jump on the bandwagon and write new versions and be happy that they could sell something new, but the customers really didn't like that idea. They also didn't like buying 286, Intel 286 machines with 2 meg of RAM in them, because their 640K was just fine, thank you. Cairo, there really was some duplication with OFS, and that was a big mistake. Is the company could not tolerate two premier file systems. We wouldn't know how to service it. We wouldn't know how to sell it. It was just confusing. Fortunately, Longhorn didn't have that duplication. We said that if we're not going to do the whiz-bang WinFS, we're just going to go and do. Well, actually, we do. We have the MSN search that's part of that, but it's a much more scaled back version of search than what WinFS could give. It has none of the schema, none of the true object-based stuff that WinFS does.
We have time for maybe one, maybe two more questions. to wrap this up, though.
Any comments on the whole hailstorm thing?
I stayed away from that.
Okay.
Yep. I was too busily working on XP and Win2K3 when Hailstorm was going on. That was Mark L. Yeah. Yeah.
So
We'll get them both. Yeah.
quick question.
Oh.
Do you have any particular advice for recent graduates or common mistakes that you see that people might do?
Advice for graduates. Okay. Don't take this wrong, but your estimation skills on how long it takes you to design a piece of code suck. It'll take you far longer than you expect. My observation is that people coming out of college invariably will say, it's going to take me 3 months to do something, and then they will goof off for the first month and a half and then realize it really will take them 3 months to do it. Yeah. So, yeah. Work steady. Be careful in what you do. That's about the only pieces of wisdom I have. Yes?
I know a lot of tech people who, when they go away from work, when they go home, they get right back on their computer and do all sorts of interesting things. And okay, so my question is, other people don't turn on a computer at home at all, and I wondered, well, what about you, and how has that changed over the years?
Well, having a computer at home, really, I never had one at home until about 95. Just because people in my home were computer illiterate and liked it that way. After we got a computer at home, it was fine for the kids, and I would help them. I would do whatever computer stuff with them they would want. But my goal when I would come home at night is, I'm a dad and I'm a husband. So, what's important? As I said there, I play with my kids, put them to bed, play with my spouse, put her to bed, and then I would do stuff after that. Certainly, I almost never got on a computer again. I would bring back piles of documents to read because that's about the only uninterrupted piece of time I would have, and that's yeah. Back to the comment about advice for college new hires. Come up with a good personal discipline for how you do your days. There are so many interruptions here, and manage your interruptions. Try to limit them to certain parts of your day. I have, this may be a little too anal, but I drive home, when I drive home at night, I try to think about what are the big things I want to do the next day. Sort of taking a look at what I need to do over the next couple of months, but still, what do I want to accomplish the next day? And I come up with the 3 or 4 that I really want to make sure I do. And then I forget about work until I drive in the next day, and I work on those 3 or 4 things. If I get 3 of them done, I'm happy because that's what it was, but at least I have a good view of what things are. Don't have Outlook open for email and respond to everything that comes in. Try to limit that to once or twice a day. I think that the company's productivity would go up by at least 20% if we deleted Internet Explorer off our machines. Limit your surfing time. And then try, if you're a person who gets invited to a lot of meetings or are either invited to a lot of meetings or people interrupt you a lot, close your door. Go to your calendar and book a private meeting, every afternoon for like 3 hours, and that's when you can get your quality time in. And like I said, manage your distractions.
So I'd like to thank Mark for being here.